Hello, everyone. So, today I want to talk about what you do when somebody refuses to validate your reality or your version of events of something. Now, specifically, why I'm doing this video is because I've seen a lot of people in one of the groups that I'm in, which is all around trauma survivors and actually adult children of sexually abused situations. And one of the common themes is a mom, especially, but sometimes it's just somebody else in the family, or maybe it's the dad, both parents, whatever, refuses to believe the child when they told them that they were being abused. And, this causes quite the cognitive dissonance within the person that was actually abused. Because at the end of the day, we are so desperately trying to have somebody validate our own reality, and that other person is refusing to validate our reality. And when we have that moment where we're saying, wait, no, this happened. How can you not believe me? And the other person is like, nope, it didn't. It causes a bit of a disconnect. So the first thing I want to do is I want to tell a little story. And this story kind of illustrates a little bit between as far as other people's perception and what they are willing and not willing to grip on. So there's an old parable about six blind men and an elephant. And a king actually invites these six blind men who've never seen an elephant, they've never heard an elephant, in to experience an elephant. And each one of the six men bumps up against a piece of the elephant. Now, one of them bumps up against the tusk, and that man's like, oh, this must be a spear because it feels sharp like a spear and long. Another one bumps up against the ear of the elephant, and he thinks that it's a fan of some sort. The third one bumps up against the tail and says, oh, this has to be a rope. And then another one bumps up against one of the legs and feels it and is like, no, it's a tree for sure. And then the fifth one bumps up against the trunk and sees how it moves and how it feels. He's like, oh, it's a snake, absolutely a snake. And then the last one bumps up just against the side of it, and he's like, no, this is a wall. This is definitely, I've hit a wall. So what you have is these six different men who all had a different perception of the same event. Now, in their situation, obviously they were without sight, so they weren't able to even see that. However, even if they did have the benefit of sight, let's say that one of the men was on the back side of the elephant and one of the men was on the front side of the elephant, they still would see two different perspectives of the same animal. Now, it doesn't mean that one's right or one's wrong in that scenario. However, all of these men, based upon their perception, right, felt something and perceived something and said, this is what it is, and this is what I'm absolutely going with. And there was no way that somebody was going to tell them that what they perceived was wrong because it wasn't what they wanted. They don't want to be told that they're wrong. Okay. Now, that is just like everybody else, right? Nobody likes to be told that you're wrong, okay? Or you don't have the situation correct, or you don't know the right answer, or, well, you weren't there, so you don't know how it went down, right? Everybody wants to sit in the space of their reality is their version of the events. And the reason is because they have their own payoff. Because if you can't trust your own eyes and your ears and what your own brain's saying, that causes a whole nother slew of questions in your brain, and your brain starts to fritz. And once your brain starts to fritz, that gets scary because then you start to question all sorts of things. You start questioning your own ability to, perceive a person as a good person or not, right? I thought these five people were quality people, and it turns out I can't even trust myself, to have a barometer of what constitutes a good person or not a good person. All right. Now, in the event of abuse, sexual trauma, right? You have adult children, and even maybe when they were children, were actually going to their parents saying, look, this happened to me. And then their parents are not believing it. And at that point, why? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, for a parent to believe that, they have to sit in the headspace that they intentionally, or even if they didn't realize at the time, but at the end of the day, they brought a predator into the wheelhouse of their child. They have to sit in that. They brought a predator into their space, and somebody that they perceived that they had a certain judgment for, which was positive judgment. Somebody else is saying something that's completely on the opposite end of the spectrum, and that, oh no, this isn't somebody that's a decent, caring person that loves me. This person's a monster, right? And that starts to create discord within that adult, because they're like, but I'm not seeing the monster. Now, they probably aren't seeing the monster because they don't want to see the monster, okay? Sometimes the monsters are very crafty, right? And they're able to gloss over certain things with certain people. Sometimes, one adult may just be weaker in the mind. And, so this person is able to convince another person that the child is telling stories, or that the adult child now is clearly, making things up, or is confused, or whatever. And that person has to sit in a space of saying, well, who do I want to believe? And what is my payoff? Right? If they stay with the person, then from their perspective, well, this person is loving me, versus I have to completely get rid of that, right? And not feel that love, and have to feel shame, because they will have to feel shame. They will have to feel a sense of guilt if they lean into your version of events. And most people, their minds do not automatically want to lean into any sense of guilt, shame, or that they were flawed in their thinking. Because once you start thinking that your own brain has made, a bad decision, it starts to question all of the other decisions you make. Okay? Doesn't matter what those decisions are. But everything comes into question within your own mind, right? The other thing is, when you sit in that space as somebody who's brought, a monster into your child's purview, you have to realize that your child now is going to have trauma for the rest of your life, and you are going to sit in the space of knowing that it was because of you, because you chose that other person to come into, your life, and by extension, that monster now came into theirs. And most people don't ever want to think that, well, yeah, I brought a monster in my child's life, right? Because then you have your own sense of shame. And then what also happens is they start focusing on their own sense of guilt and shame, instead of focusing on the fact that the child themselves is who really needs the help. And what the child really needs is to be believed, and to be held and supported, and to be removed from the monster. That's where you have a lot of cognitive dissonance that happens in somebody's mind. And we know, when we walk through life, and a lot of people get really stuck in a codependency of needing to feel loved, or wanting to feel loved, and they get desperate for, to have that feeling. And then when they have somebody come into their being that's showing them some form of love, right? They don't want to get rid of that. They will project and say things to the child like, oh, you just don't like him, and you need to get along with him. You need to find a way, right? And that's actually very dangerous to the child, because what it's also doing to the child is telling the child that their reality is not to be trusted, that their mind is the one that is flawed, that they're the ones that is crazy in the head. And then the child, okay, ends up trying to make sense as far as, is my mind flawed? Am I crazy? Am I making things up in my head? And it has its own sense of cognitive dissonance. Now, one of the other problems with this is the brain is an engine, okay? It's a CPU, a central processing unit. and it forms all of its foundational programming for how we react to fight, fright, freeze, fawn, okay, by the time we're 7 years old. So if you encounter any abuse under the age of 7, it is now literally baked into your foundational programming of you. And now, even if you're over the age of 7, okay, but let's say you're up to maybe the age of 16, okay, anytime in there, what happens is when, somebody else comes and tries to say, your mind is broken, your mind is not to be trusted, okay, your brain doesn't finish its development until you're 25. So your mind starts trying to figure out what's broken. What's broken inside me? What isn't working properly, right? I have these data points, I'm putting them together, and they're computing this output. But this person that I'm supposed to trust, I'm supposed to love, and who is supposed to protect me is telling me different. So the mind ends up getting stuck between the person that is supposed to love and trust and keep me safe is telling me that my brain is broken. Okay. And that causes a whole nother like ball of emotions that go on. It creates anxiety. It creates confusion. It creates their own cognitive dissonance. And so you have these two competing brains as far as what were the events of your reality. Now, how do you move past that? It's a really good question. But I'm going to tell you the answer. The first answer is this. If you have been abused and you went to the person that was supposed to protect you and they refuse to believe your version of events, then the only thing that you can do is basically one of two things. The first thing is sit in the headspace that your reality is the version of events. It's what happened. And it doesn't matter if somebody else believes you or not. You're going to have to let go of the idea that you're going to get someone to validate your reality. And you need to instead simply sit in the space that your reality is the reality. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the entire world tells you that it's not the reality. If that's your reality, then sit in that headspace. That's the reality. That's what happened. And I'm not going to let anybody else tell me it didn't. And I'm also not going to continue to fight to change somebody else's perceived idea of their reality. Because you just know. It's like saying 2 + 2 = 4. You just know it's 4. That's what it is. And if they want to say it's not 4, well, they can go back to math class, but it's 4. The next thing that I highly suggest you do is you walk away from them. You walk away from them and you instead walk towards people that are willing to embrace you and are willing to support you and are willing to listen to you and are willing to help you through the pain, the confusion, the anxiety that comes with it, because there are so many negative brain loops that have occurred in your mind in this whole process, okay? And by that, I don't just even mean the mind. I also mean the mind as it relates to how the mind works with the rest of the body, okay? Because there's all sorts of experiences that the brain now is hardwired to react a certain way. It could be when somebody goes to hug you, right? Maybe you freak out. You may not be good with, touching. Somebody wants to hold your hand, maybe that's a bridge too far. And so all of these things can kind of wrap up in a problem. So you need to go towards people that will love you, support you, agree to help you, and you need to walk away from those who absolutely will not validate your reality, because you are never going to get them to validate that reality, because it's going to cause too much pain within them. Okay, it's going to cause situations they don't want to deal with. And at the end of the day, you don't really want to be around people like that, do you? I mean, you can say, but they're my mom. Well, stop. So what? Then your mom's flawed. There's a problem there. Walk away from your mom. Clearly, your mom is not willing to be the mother that you need her to be. Or if it's your father, then you know what? Your father's not willing to be the father that you need him to be. It's hard to sit in that headspace, but that's what you have to do for your mental health and well-being, and walk towards people that'll support you. And trust me, those people exist. They do. You have to find them, you have to look for them. And if that means you've got to walk away from the entire family you're in, then walk away from them. You know, you're not doing yourself any favors surrounding yourself with people that aren't willing to love and support you and also defend you and also, get your back. And instead, you need to be with people that are willing to do that. So I hope this information helps. And for everybody that is a trauma survivor, from one trauma survivor to another, I'm really sorry that happened to you. And I hope that we are all in the world trying to make the world a better place. And at the end of the day, the one thing I know from a lot of the trauma survivors that, I've spoken to is that we are absolutely here to break the cycle. And we are absolutely committed to not continuing that cycle down to other children. And for me, that's part of the headspace that I sit in, is that I've broken the cycle. It is not continuing with me. It will not continue with me. And my hope is that you all can hope to find some peace in that concept as well, that you are breaking the cycle. So have a great day. Have a great weekend. If you need any life coaching at all, reach out to me on my website. Definitely, if you like my videos, subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting more stuff. Website is talktopalace.com. Thanks.